أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا من يهده الله فلا مضل ومن يضلل فلا هادي وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له عز وجل وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة من يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشد ومن يأسهما فإن لا يضر إلا نفسه ولا يضر الله شيئا أما بعد فقال الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم في سورة البقرة بسم الله تلك أمة قد خلت لها ما كسبت ولكم ما كسبتم ولا تسألون عما كانوا يعملون وصدق الله العظيم بارك الله لي ولكم في القرآن الكريم ونفعني وإياكم بالذكر الحكيم إنه هو جواد رؤوف رحيم. الآن هيا ترجم اللغة العربية إلى اللغة الإنجليزية. I seek refuge in Allah from Satan, from Shaitan, the accursed devil. In the name of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate, all praise is due to Allah. All gratitude is due to Allah. We seek His help and beg His forgiveness. And I seek refuge in Allah from the mischief. We seek refuge in Allah from the mischief and the evils of our souls. Whomsoever Allah guides, there is none who can lead that person astray, and whomsoever Allah finds in error, there is none to guide them. I bear witness there is no God, no deity existing, and therefore worthy of worship, except Almighty Allah, glory be to Him, who is one alone, unique, without partner or associate. And I bear witness further that Prophet Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, is Allah's servant, messenger, and apostle. And He, Allah, has sent His messenger in truth and with the truth, as a bearer of glad tidings and also as a warner in advance of the hour of judgment. Therefore, whomsoever obeys Allah and His messenger, surely that person is rightly guided, and whomsoever disobeys the two of them, surely that person harms only his or her own soul. And they harm not Allah the least little bit, the slightest little bit, as for what follows. For Allah, glory be to Him, has said in the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, the second surah of the Quran, the 141st ayah or verse. That was a nation, that was a people who had already passed away. They are responsible for what they did, and you are responsible for what you do. And you shall not be questioned about their deeds. And surely Allah, glory be to Him, has spoken the truth. O you who worship Allah. In this verse that we have heard from the Quran, and indeed in many verses, Allah instructs us or encourages us to look at groups of people who preceded us in time and space, and to reflect upon them, reflect upon their lives, reflect upon their existence on the earth, and to learn from the example that they have set for us. In this verse, just prior to saying that was a nation that has already passed away. Just before then, Allah speaking of the Akhirah Kitab, Allah speaking of the children of the book from the Bani Israel. And many times in the Quran, Allah mentions groups of people. And I'm distinguishing here from groups or nations of people from individuals. Sometimes Allah mentions individuals also. But he also mentions groups and nations of people. The Ad, the Samud, the people of Fir'aun, the people of Pharaoh, the people of Noah, the people of the book. Allah mentions groups of people, and then he encourages us as a group of people, as an ummah, as a nation, to reflect upon the example left by those who preceded us, by our ancestors, in order that we might learn ancestral lessons. Oh, you who believe. So we know, as we have been reminding ourselves over the past few weeks, that we see ourselves now, we're down to the last day, 2 days, today and tomorrow, last 2 days of the month of February. And the month of February throughout the United States of America and also in Canada, the month of February is officially recognized as Black History Month. Black History Month is also unofficially recognized in other countries. It's unofficially recognized in the UK. It's unofficially recognized even in Ireland. But here in the United States, February is known as Black History Month. Now, of course, here at MIB, every month is Black History Month. However, Black History Month started out as an educational initiative. It was implemented or instituted not just by anybody, but by an American of African descent who was an educator. And in his reviewing the educational curriculum of the schools of America, from elementary school all the way up until college, he noticed, Carter G. Woodson noticed, that those educational curriculums lacked information about the contributions of Black people, the contributions of Americans of African descent to the quality of life in America and to making America what it has turned out to be for the good. And I've mentioned this to you before. However, I now want to contrast this, or we want to contrast this with what Allah encourages us to do. Allah encourages us to look at other groups of people and learn from their example. And so Black History Month encourages people to look at the accomplishments of a people, of individuals within a people, in order that we might learn ancestral lessons. Let me give you 2 examples, because 2 things happened this past week, just since last Jumah, that illustrate this point. Number 1 was the passing away of Katherine Johnson. I've mentioned her before. Katherine Johnson was a mathematician, an African-American mathematician, who was one of the key people responsible for the implementation of the United States space program. Now, perhaps you know that when it comes to space travel, space technology, the United States government has always been ahead, or has been ahead since the early 1960s, of every other nation on Earth. And so I have mentioned to you in the past how I went to see this film a couple of years ago that was called Hidden Figures. And that film was about a group of, I think it was three or four African American women who worked for NASA, who worked for the National Administration of Space, National Aeronautical and Space Administration. And they worked back during the 60s when the United States was struggling, trying to catch up with Russia, because at that time, Russia was at the head of what they called then the space race. What they called, when I was a young boy, they called it the space race. It was Russia, as it was then called, the Soviet Union. They were the first ones to put an unmanned probe into outer space. They were the first ones to launch a satellite on a rocket and have that satellite orbit the Earth. The Russians called them Sputniks. So the United States was concerned about catching up with Russia and surpassing Russia, because they were already looking ahead and projecting ahead to the possibility of weaponizing space technology. So on the NASA base, where they started, the United States during the administration of John Kennedy, the United States started putting forth a mighty effort to implement its own space program. And working in that space program were 4 Black American women. And one of them, Katherine Johnson, was a mathematical genius. You know, if you're going to implement a space program, you don't just put something on the launching pad and just shoot it up. If you want to have a goal, it takes mathematical calculations to do that. And this young girl named Katherine Johnson had been a prodigy in math. Not a prodigy in playing the piano, not a prodigy in shooting basketball. She, a young black girl from the South, was a prodigy in mathematics. And she grew up to be a mathematical genius. And when the United States government was having all kind of problems with this space program, they brought in this young woman who was the genius, and she started doing all of the calculations. If you have not seen that film, Hidden Figures, you should go home, turn on Netflix, and sit down and watch it. And it was her mathematical genius that enabled the United States first to put men in orbit around the planet, and then eventually to send men to the moon. And she and her 3 colleagues, all of whom were Black American women, they were working in a building at NASA where they weren't even allowed to use the bathroom. You know, this is back during the time when they had segregated bathrooms. So in that building, the bathrooms were for white women only. So when they had to use the restroom, the black women had to exit the building and walk a little short distance to another building and go in that building and use the bathroom. Yet and still, it was their genius, one of them in math, another one in computer science and so forth, that put the United States at the top of the space program. During the Obama administration, President Obama, former President Obama, he gave Katherine Johnson an American Medal of Freedom Award because she had never been given the level and the type of recognition that she deserved. Just now, President Trump, he just gave out some American Medal of Freedoms. He gave one to Rush Limbaugh. I mean, just to show you the difference in the quality of the assessment. And so then this past week, a few days ago, Katherine Johnson passed away at the age of 101 years old. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. And then the day before yesterday, it might even have been yesterday, I turned on the news. Generally, I watch several news programs a day on different channels because I'm just trying to keep up with what's going on. So I turned on the news, Channel 1, New York 1. And on New York 1, they had a story, one of those short stories about an African-American electrical engineer and genius whose name was Granville T. Woods. And Granville T. Woods, again, a few weeks ago, I was talking about Black American geniuses and how their work, they never get full credit for their work, although their work is always at the center of the technology of the United States. So, and I mentioned Lewis Latimer, this genius of an inventor who worked and co-partnered with Thomas Edison in creating the first light bulb. Lewis Latimer created the carbon filament in the bulb so that when you turn it on, it would stay on. Well, there was another genius whose name was Granville T. Woods, and he was an electrical genius. Granville T. Woods invented the third rail in the subway. Granville T. Woods invented the telegraph. So not Samuel Morse. Granville T. Woods invented the telegraph that could be used in between trains, so that trains could communicate with each other, so that they wouldn't crash into each other, when they were on the tracks and whatnot, and several other inventions. So in New York 1, they were talking about Granville T. Woods yesterday, and how he invented this and invented that, and how the modern day subway system, and here we go again, the United States of America, going back decades and decades ago, going back to the last century, its rail system and its building of trains was key in exporting that technology to the world. Of course, the Japanese perfected it, but the initial technology came from the United States of America, and many aspects of that technology were invented by this black man whose name was Granville T. Woods. Now, why is that particularly important? Number one, how many people ride the subway in New York every day? And how many people ride the subway but have no idea of who was responsible for creating and fomenting that technology? Two, as Granville T. Woods was inventing all of these things, and I was amazed, he was self-taught for the most part. So as he was creating all of these inventions, not only did he create the inventions, but he always had to protect himself against patent infringement, because people kept trying to steal his invention. He even ended up in 2 major court battles with Edison, with Thomas Edison, because Edison was trying to steal his work and steal credit for his work. Work that, had Granville T. Woods been of a European ethnicity, he would have been, needless to say, a millionaire, if not a billionaire, way back then. Yet, when Granville T. Woods died, and when he would take people to court, he would win. He took Edison to court twice, won. Yet, when he died, when Granville T. Woods died, I think he died in 1910, he was buried in a pauper's grave here in New York. And he didn't even get a headstone on his grave until 1975. To show you the extent of the injustice. Why do I mention this? I mention this because these are the accomplishments of outstanding individuals from a people. And the individual doesn't get credit, oftentimes, certainly not during their time, for their work, and their people don't get credit for producing individuals like this. So I mention this in particular, brothers and sisters, because it is important when we start talking about people. Everybody's always talking about black people, always talking about, in the American context, always talking about Americans of African descent. It's Americans of African descent who are going to determine for real who's going to be the next president. It's on the news every day. It's on the news every day. And we need to know, those of us who are Americans of African descent and everybody else need to know that the accomplishments of this rejected, despised, discriminated against people, our people's great accomplishments, they're not only in struggle. You know, every Black History Month, they're always showing things about Al Hajj, Shabazz, Malcolm X, and Dr. King, and Fannie Lou Hamer, and this one and that one, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman. So, they always show, and that's true. We have, as a people, great accomplishments when it comes to social justice struggle. And we have great accomplishments also in art and music and sports. But we have to also know that we are people who have had great accomplishments in math, in science, and technology. I mean, coming out of slavery, George Washington Carver, next generation after slavery. And this is important for us to know. It's important for us to, as they say, lift up. It's important for us to recognize. Why? Because I guarantee you that there are little black boys and girls who are in elementary school now and who are being born every day who have that same kernel of genius within them, and some of those children are Muslims. I guarantee you that within the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam in America, that there are children who are being born who are mathematical geniuses, children who are being born who have a talent for science and technology and what have you. And so we who are the Muslims, we must support and foment the principle of education within our ummah. We should not only be encouraging our children to learn the Quran. Should we be encouraging them to do that? Oh, yes. But we should not put it in their heads that, well, you learn the Quran and that's it, because ain't nobody going to pay you no salary to recite no Quran, for the most part. You understand? And other people master the Quran as children and then go on and become lawyers, go on and become doctors. They're just lawyers and doctors who've memorized the Quran. I know one. I know a young man, his name is Rashad Hussein. He was a lawyer who worked in the White House during the Obama administration. President Obama appointed him the head of the U.S. envoy to the Organization of the Islamic Conference. He was responsible for dealing with Muslims from all over the world. And he's a kid born and raised in Chicago, Hafiz of Quran, but he was also a lawyer. if you think back to that first major speech that President Obama gave when he went overseas, where was the speech? It was in Cairo. So I happen to know that when he was going to Cairo, you know, he has people who work with him who are speechwriters. So he had two versions of the same speech. One of them that had verses of the Quran in it. Go back and look it up. He's talking, he's quoting the Quran and whatnot. So he had two manuscripts, one with the Quran and verses and one without. That's what they presented to him. It was this young brother, Rashad Hussein, who was the Hafiz of Quran. He's the one that produced the version that Obama ultimately gave, you see. So we should be looking to encourage our children to learn the Quran. You know, in the masjid, in the neighborhood. They ain't got to go over to Saudi Arabia to learn the Quran. But we should create and support programs, but then we should also encourage programs in math, programs in science, programs in business administration, programs in entrepreneurship, programs in medicine. Why? Because we are an ummah by the grace of Allah, and we need human resources in order to further the advancement of our people. And furthering the advancement of our people as Muslims will further the advancement of Islam in the society. Look around New York City. And look around New York City at how many Muslim doctors there are working in all of these hospitals. Most of them come from places like, you know, Pakistan, India, maybe now and then some of the African countries. Not enough of them come from Americans of African descent, and this is our country, quote unquote. Okay? So again, I want to call upon us to reflect upon ancestral lessons. The fact that this people could produce a Granville T. Woods, a George Washington Carver, a Katherine Johnson, that's supposed to be a lesson for us. Because, as Marcus Garvey once said, you know, what man has done, man can do. What man has done, man can do. And we need to know that we are just as capable of doing what has been done. Black History Month should be a month of studying lessons, not just a month of talking about what our ancestors did. As Allah said, that was them. They will reap the fruits of what they did, and you of what you do. So if we as a people of the past produce scientists and mathematicians and what good is that going to do us if we're not producing them now? If we're not producing computer technologists. So I want to encourage us, brothers and sisters, because, you know, we're listening, we're giving this khutbah, we're listening to this khutbah with our kufis and kimars on. We're listening to it as Muslims who are an ummah. Allah says that was an ummah that passed away. And may Allah bless us to think like an ummah, to analyze like an ummah, and to plan our future, not only as individuals, but also as a community. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Astaghfirullah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم بارك وسلم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد عليه السلام والسلام وعلى آله وأصحابه وأنصاره أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وبعد، فقال الله تعالى في سورة الأنعام: قل سيروا في الأرض ثم انظروا كيف كان عاقبة المكذبين. وصدق الله العظيم. بارك اللهم اغفر لنا مسلمين ومسلمات ومؤمنين ومؤمنات ومحسنين ومحسنات. وبعد. For Allah has said in the Quran, Surah 6, Ayah 11, say, travel through the earth and see what was the end of those who denied the truth. O you who worship Allah. As I said, one of Allah's teaching mechanisms in the Quran is He speaks to the Ummah, He speaks to the Muslims, and He teaches us, He instructs us, He commands us, in this case, to travel through the earth. To travel through the earth, and in traveling through the earth, to do so reflecting upon those who came before us, those who accomplished things before us, those who lived before us, etc. And in this case, Allah tells us, travel through the earth and see what happened to those who denied the truth. These two are ancestral lessons. So we have a growing global crisis right now called the coronavirus. Coronavirus. Every day, if you're keeping up with the reports, every day there's an increasing number of instances being reported. The coronavirus has an increasing impact globally. Of course, the President of the United States, two things about the President. We're now witnessing the manifestation of the wisdom of the old story of the ancients, of the boy who cried wolf, wherein the president, who lies all the time, every day, about everything, so he gets on television for a quick moment and tells a truth about the coronavirus, and the uniform response was, man, I don't believe a thing he's saying, man. He lied about everything else. He could be lying about this. And then he proved that, because then he turned right around and started lying about the virus. Well, we don't really have a problem here in the United States. He said, when he's in India, we don't really have a problem with that. Everything is under control. And then he started saying things that contradict what medical people in the United States are saying. The medical people in the United States are saying, get ready. It's going to be heading this way. We're not going to escape this medical problem that's spreading throughout the world. That's what the experts are saying. Now they have a reported case which they investigated in California, found the person to indeed have the coronavirus. This is a person that doesn't travel, has not been to the part of the world where the virus is. The person lives in the country in California, doesn't live in the city, so they don't know how this person became infected, but they verified that he is infected. Why do I mention this? Because the coronavirus, again, looking at ancestral lessons, the coronavirus is a virus that originates with animals and gets transferred from animals to human beings. There are several illnesses like that, but the coronavirus is one of them. And when I was studying this, I listened to a report that said that one of the ways that animals come into contact with human beings to the degree that diseases get transmitted is because human beings in the modern industrial age are constantly moving into environments that are the realms of certain animals. They move in the middle of nowhere, put up a gated community with no regards to the impact on the environment, and the environment includes animals. I also thought, I haven't heard this one on the news yet, I also thought, man, I wonder if this comes from eating certain animals. Now, which they are reported to do in abundance in China. Now, let me point out something to you, okay? We're Muslims. As Muslims, Allah has legislated for us what we can eat and what we can't eat from amongst animals. However, if you live a lifestyle like they do in China, where there is hostility or opposition to eating that way. And how do you know that? Because Muslims are being oppressed in China. Their way of life is being oppressed in China. Now in China, they're passing laws forbidding Muslim women from wearing the niqab, wearing the face veil. Now everybody got a face veil on.
Yeah.
This is like Allah fixing them. Yeah, okay? You mess with my people, the men and the women got them on now. Okay? So again, and they might be eating all types of rodents. Rodents are haram, are forbidden in Islamic law. Eating pigs and other types of animals, any one of which could be carrying a disease that doesn't harm the animal, but if it gets inside of a human being, will result in a virus. And don't be fooled by the name of it, because again, I was watching a science report. They say that the coronavirus is 2,000 times more deadly than the regular flu virus. We hear it's a flu, so yeah, well, we get flus. No, man, this is 2,000 times more deadly than the regular flu. So Allah says in the Quran, travel the earth and see what was the fate of people who came before you. And if we do that, and if we do what Allah has said, then that should impel you and I to take this matter of the coronavirus, and before there was Ebola and all that, we have to take this stuff very seriously, man. Because when you study the history of mankind, we find many instances of large segments of the human population being wiped out by viruses, wiped out by plagues. Not just, overseas in the ancient world, I mean right here in America. See, most of us, if not all of us, we too young to remember, when smallpox was taking lives right here in America, and different types of venereal diseases, which, by the way, many of them originating in animals. Many of these human venereal diseases originate in animals. So when you study scientific studies, they say that somewhere way back when, that these diseases got introduced into the human population by men who were having sexual relationships with animals. And don't shake your head like, oh man, how can that be? Because they arrest people all the time for doing that. Except now, if you get caught, you can be arrested and they'll charge you with abusing their animals. You see? So we have to take, diseases, plagues very seriously. HIV/AIDS was a global pandemic that went on for many years, took the lives of millions of people. The Ebola virus, just a few years ago, hundreds and thousands of people have lost their lives. So we must, as Muslims, take these, when we see these signs of Allah manifesting themselves, don't just say, ah, man, let me go see what you're talking about Kobe Bryant, man. Let me turn the channel, man. I'm not interested in that. You better be interested. We better be interested as a community because we live in America. And in America, there are all kinds of illnesses and diseases that impact the poor to such a large degree they don't even talk about it, man. Don't you know that in the poorer parts of New York City and the poorer parts of America, where the quality of the water is poor, the quality of the air is poor, the quality of the food is poor, don't you know that those same sections of the city or the country are the ones that where the people are suffering from all kinds of health ailments? They still haven't solved the problem with the poisoning of the water in Detroit. So these are not matters that are irrelevant to us as Muslims any more than climate change is irrelevant. It's very relevant to us because we are Muslims, and as Muslims we are human beings. So let me say in conclusion, the signs of Allah manifest themselves every day, and we must learn our ancestral lessons. Let me tell you something else that's going on right now. Going on right now. Do you know that there is a problem with locust plagues in East Africa? Been going on for months. Locust plagues are devastating the land, the vegetation, and the economy in East Africa. To the point, I did the research, right, where there are swarms of locusts that in size are up to 926.6 square miles. You heard me. 926.6 square miles. Locusts flying through the air in swarms. They originate in Arabia, and they're now all in Eastern Africa. 926.6 square miles is equal to 192 billion locusts. And for the most part, we over here in America, safe. We don't even understand it. And 192 billion locusts eat enough vegetation that would be equivalent to 35,000 people eating a day. So then you look in the Bible, you look in the Quran, and you see about locust plagues during the time of Nabi Musa alayhi salam in Egypt. People look at that and they think that's some kind of myth. No, man, that's serious truth. And it's going on right now. And America is not immune from the possibilities of these types of things. They used to have locust plagues in America. You know, you don't know that, but that's back before our time. One time in American history, locust plagues devastated the Midwest and took all that farmland in Kansas and all those kind of places and devastated the land. And because we are Muslims, that does not make us immune to that. Right now, I'm looking, I see our brother Ali just got back from Umrah, just in time. Because day before yesterday, Saudi Arabia made an announcement that for the time being, they're not letting people travel to make Umrah or to visit the Prophet's mosque. If you're already over there, like he was, you can get out. But particularly if you're coming from certain countries, certain parts of the world, you can't get in. Now that's some serious stuff, man. They're starting to put, restrictions around visiting the Holy Land. So let us be mindful, brothers and sisters, of the signs of Allah. Once during the Caliphate of Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiallahu anh, a plague broke out in Syria. And Umar had been traveling, and when he got to the borders of Syria, he was met by some of the other Muslim leaders, and they told him, listen, man, there's a plague, and you come across this border and keep traveling, you're going to run into a plague-infested land. And Umar, radiallahu anh, may Allah's compassion be upon him, Umar said, what? Okay. He said, you turn around to all his troops and everyone said, we're out of here, man. So one of the leaders said, Ya Umar, Ya Amir al-Mu'minun, you fleeing from the qadar of Allah? He asked him. And Umar said to him in response, I'm fleeing from the qadar of Allah, the decree of Allah. He said, I'm fleeing from the decree of Allah to the decree of Allah. That was his response. In other words, Allah has decreed many things. Allah has decreed solutions, and Allah has decreed problems, and Allah has decreed solutions to problems. Allah has decreed diseases, and Allah has decreed cures. Allah has decreed catastrophes, and Allah has decreed methods for dealing with or coping with catastrophes. And so Umar demonstrated that. He said, man, you already told me there's a plague there. I don't have to go in there, man. I'm going this way. Because all of it has been decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so I encourage you, dear brothers, I encourage you, dear sisters, to keep your minds open as Muslims. Don't get so wrapped up in the dogma of our faith, the dogma of our religion, that you forget that Islam is also a religion of science. You forget Islam is a religion of education. Forget Islam is a religion of art and all of these types of things. Just before I was getting ready to come down for Jumah, I'll say this and I'm through. I got a text message on a text tree that the imams keep amongst ourselves. Imams, not just in New York, but from other cities. So I got a text message from a brother in Philly. And he identified himself. He's from Imam Asim's community in Philly. Masjid Mujahideen. Imam Asim is the Amir of the Majlis Ashura of Philadelphia. So he identified himself, I know him, and he's a professional healthcare practitioner. And he said that the reports are coming in now in relation to the coronavirus. And he said that there's two things that people can do, that anybody can do, to help detect and safeguard themselves against the virus. One, he said, that you can self-test if you get to the point where you start not feeling well. He said, get in a clean room, make sure the room is clean, take a deep breath, and hold your breath for about 10 seconds. He said, if you can't hold your breath for 10 seconds without breaking off, coughing, and all of that kind of thing, you might be infected. You need to get straight to the hospital. Because most people wait until they become really sick, then they go to the hospital. But with the coronavirus, the longer you wait, the more of a problem you're going to have. So these doctors in China, they recommended, and they're making this recommendation at the same time that they're testing, and no testing going on in America yet, but in China, they're running publicly government-sponsored or conducted tests, but they're also recommending that people self-test. You don't have to wait on the government. And if you know what I know in America, you won't wait on the government to implement anything. And then the second thing that this brother said, the doctors in Japan are recommending the constant drinking of water. I said to myself, look at this. Why? Because even if you contract the virus, if you're constantly drinking water, which is something we should be doing anyway, and drinking lots of it anyway, these doctors said that it flushed the virus that tends to, when it first enters the system, it enters through the throat, and it can lodge in the throat. But if you constantly drinking water, they're saying drink water every 15 minutes. That if you drink water and you constantly flushing all of this, it will flush the virus into your stomach. And you know, the stomach has a very hostile environment to viruses. The acid in the stomach kills viruses and things of that nature. So as soon as I saw it, I said, I'm going to share this. Because we don't have to just sit passively and wait for something to happen. We should be intelligent. We should be aware. And particularly with suggestions that are made. I mean, most of us don't drink enough water anyway. I don't know about you. I'm working on myself trying to drink more water. Most Americans don't drink a lot of water, in spite of the fact of the astronomical sales of water in the stores. You understand? How much water do you drink a day? I mean, just sit down and drink some water. But it's good for you. It'll help maintain your health, your weight, and everything else. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us. I wanted to try to deliver a message today that is spiritual in nature, but has practical dunya concern. And remember, the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, where he said, you have a duty and an obligation to Allah. And you have a duty and an obligation to your body. And you have a duty and an obligation to your family, the Prophet said. So give each one its rights. And if we study the lessons of those who have come before us in each one of those areas, then it will teach us beneficial lessons from the example of our ancestors. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أستغفرك وأتوب إليك آمين وألقى الإكرام